Euterpe, welcome to Classics in Color, your weekly dive into some of the ancient world's wackiest facts. I'm Mark Graves, and today I'm going to be talking about some famous gods and heroes with various disabilities. First, of course, is Homer. Homer was famously blind. We don't have any hard facts about this, but in almost every story of Homer, he is blind. And even in the Odyssey, so Odysseus has stopped off at this friendly kingdom and they're having dinner together, and there's a singer of songs or teller of tales who's entertaining them, and he is blind. And many people think that this is Homer's way of sort of inserting himself into the story, of giving himself a little cameo. And this singer even at one point says, "And it's good, you are a good man because you tip me very well." So it's thought that maybe this is Homer sort of nudging whoever he's telling his story to. So that's a fun little story within a story and self-reference. And it's interesting that Homer is considered, or it's thought that Homer's blindness may even be a good thing for him, sort of, in a way. It's thought that sometimes the gods compensate people who are blind by giving them better vision in other ways, in that they're very good at telling stories. Tiresias, for example, is struck blind, but in the play Oedipus, no one has any idea what's going on except for Tiresias. So he's the only one who has any vision, so to speak, of the present or the past. So in some ways, blindness was sort of a weakness, but also sort of a strength. So that's quite interesting. Next is Hephestus. So in a lot of portrayals of Hephestus, he's just portrayed as a normal, big buff, godlike dude. But in some, you can see that one of his legs is crippled, or sometimes even both are just completely curled under. And he's often called the limping god, and he's sometimes called ugly as well. So poor guy is often called ugly and crippled. And the idea is that he was born this way by Hera, and apparently this was because Hera was desperately trying to get pregnant without Zeus. So Zeus had Athena without a woman, sort of, and she wanted to do the same to get back at him. So through magic or science or what have you, she gave birth to Hephestus, but because it was so unnatural, he came out different. And the story goes that either she was so upset at this, or Zeus was mad at him and they threw him off of Mount Olympus. So that didn't help his legs at all, I'm sure. But he, much like Homer, was able to compensate. He was an incredibly clever god, and so he just rode around on a donkey and he built his stuff. And he was even able to get back at his mother by creating this beautiful throne that he gave to her. But then once she sat on it, came alive and basically grabbed her, and none of the gods could get her out. And so Zeus eventually had to bargain with Hephestus and giving him Aphrodite in exchange for letting Hera go. So Hephestus is able to basically overcome his challenges and get back at the people who wronged him. So I have a lot of love and sympathy for Hephestus. Another leg injury was had by Philoctetes. So he was one of the Greek warriors and heroes who had all geared up to go to Troy, and on the way there they stopped at this island, and as he was exploring, he got bit by a snake. And the wound was apparently very extreme and festering. It didn't go away. It smelled bad. He would have seizures. He would be screaming and moaning all the time, and it really bothered the other Greeks. And apparently eventually Odysseus said, "Let's just leave him. He's not getting any better." So in the night they snuck away and they left him on this island, wounded and handicapped on his own, basically. And it's a bit of a revenge on his part that as they're fighting at Troy, they don't win, and eventually they get told by an omen that they need Philoctetes' bow to win. So Odysseus gets assigned to go back to this island and try to get the bow from Philoctetes, and there's a whole play about that, but definitely an interesting story. Next is Bellerophon, actually, suffering from what's roughly depression. So he was the hero who flew around on the Pegasus and defeated the Chimera, and after all this he got kind of cocky, so he tried to fly to Olympus on Pegasus, and the gods are like, heck no, struck him with lightning and he falls, and he's permanently sort of injured and also depressed. So Aristotle says of him that when indeed he was hated by all the gods, verily over the Aleian plain he wandered alone, devouring his spirit, avoiding the path of men. So I like the Greek a bit better here. Actually, it says something like eating his own heart out. So it really gets at the pain that he's feeling. And then Aristotle is citing him as an example of what sort of depression, or what he called melancholy. So he says more generally that, why is it that all those men who have become extraordinary in philosophy, politics, poetry, or the arts are obviously melancholic, and some to such an extent that they are seized by the illness that come from black bile. So this is roughly equivalent to depression, as I said, and there was a stereotype that people who were very brilliant often suffered from this disease of just being sad, of wanting to be alone. So that's very interesting. Next is the less well-known goddess, Euterpe. She's a muse of elegiac or lyric poetry and of flutes and lyres, and she's usually depicted in Renaissance art anyway with a flute. So lyric and elegiac are usually performed to the accompaniment of music, and they're usually about more personal topics. They're not big, grand epics or tragedies. Elegiac is often mourning, so you're sad about something and you want to sing the song or recite this poem. And it comes along with a specific meter. So ancient poetry doesn't rhyme because it's way too easy to rhyme in ancient Greece and Latin. They're more based on the meter, so you should check that out if you don't already know about that. But it's basically the rhythm of and how the syllables are set up, and it's quite complicated. But elegiac is very much like the meter that they use for epic. It's just a little bit shorter. It's missing what's called a foot off of the end. So Ovid writes in his Amores, in the prologue of this work, that whilst I was strolling here, enveloped in woodland shadows, asking myself what work my muse should venture on, or what he should write about his next poetry, came Elegy with coil of odorous locks, and I think 1 foot longer than its mate. She had a comely form, her robe was gauzy light, her face suffused with love, and the fault in her carriage added to her grace. So this is sort of a joke about how Elegy is a little bit lopsided. She has 1 foot longer than the other because of that difference in meter. And she shows up, and she basically has a little rap battle of sorts with the muse Melpomene, who's the muse of tragedy. So Ovid is sort of torn between if he wants to write about something more personal or something more serious and weighty like tragedy. So he imagines these two muses sort of battling out, trying to persuade him to pick one of them. So it's a very interesting and less well-known goddess that has a little bit of a limp that Ovid says actually adds to her grace, that it makes her all the more charming. Finally, I'm going to talk about Telesphorus. So he was one of the children of Asclepius, who was the god of healing. So he's a very, very famous god, had temples all over the place that people would come to be healed, and he had many children with different jobs and associations that were pretty interesting, actually. But just Telesphorus was one of them, and the name means the accomplisher. So he would accomplish things and he would help with healing, I guess. And he is portrayed in these little tokens as a little dwarf. So he's a little dwarf, and he's a term of good luck and of healing. So he doesn't really have a hard time, as far as I can tell. He just brings good luck and healing to people. Thank you so much for checking out this video on famous gods and heroes of the ancient world with different disabilities and how they dealt with them or failed to deal with them. I hope to see you next week. Karete!